just like, there's a war. What happened to my teeth? Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Brain Blaze. War and drugs, World War II soldiers go mad on crystal meth. I love this. The Nazis, this was like Pervitin's origins, right? Like, how are we gonna get the soldiers to fight more and harder? Methamphetamines, yes! Nazism, everybody. I mean, this was like the least crazy thing that the Nazis did. Anyway, let's just crack on with it. Thank you, Danny, for writing it. Thank you, me, for reading it. Big brain. And thank you for being here. Those brave soldiers fighting on the battlefields of World War II could at least look forward to opening their ration packs during quieter moments when the enemy forces were taking a quick breather from trying to blow them to bits. There was sadly no sign of any pickled onion Monster Munch crisps, as these wouldn't be invented until 1977. I don't like Monster Munch. This is a super British reference. It's this weird, it's very... I have to say, right, I, as a kid, liked everything. I didn't really have any foods that I didn't eat. I didn't like pesto, and then I sound like, I liked everything, and now I'm about to list a bunch of foods that I did eat. I didn't like pesto. I don't know why, because I had pesto as an adult, like decades later, and I was like, this is delicious. What was I talking about?
Finally, some good fucking food. Well done. Wow.
And I thought I hated it my whole life, and now I love it. I love pesto. The problem is pasta. I don't really love pasta. I mean, I like pasta. But it's like, pasta is so bad for you compared to how tasty it is. It's like, yo, you can have this bowl of pasta or a pizza. And I'm like, there is no competition. There just isn't. There's just not. It's the pizza every time. What am I talking about? Oh, yeah. And so, but some things I didn't like. I didn't like a bunch of crisps. I didn't like Monster Munch. I didn't like salt and vinegar. Don't like prawn cocktail. I think they were just all too sour for me. But this is not interesting at all. And people are already clicking off, so let's carry on.
It's too late to run, Malone. It's too late!
But depending on which country you were serving, you might find a tin of bully beef, a packet of 4 Lucky Strike cigarettes, a can of American processed cheese, or pellets of dried instant soup. Yum, yum, yum. Or, if you weren't in the mood for any of that nonsense, you might just find enough crystal meth to keep the fighting funk flowing back into your soul before the disco bells start ringing again to mark the beginning of the next round. Well, you need something to take the edge off, don't you? Does crystal meth take the edge off? I feel like crystal meth puts the edge on. It'd be like things that take the edge off. Weed. Opium. I'm not sure, I'm not a drug expert. But like, I'm not going to be like, it's time to relax. Let's do some meth. It's like, time to have a chill evening. Let's do a few lines of coke.
Now, Brian, I understand we have some crack, and we're going to smoke it right here in the studio. I don't know if you can get a shot of that.
What is that?
For millennia, oh yeah, booze. For millennia, that's something was usually booze. I'd much rather have a beer in there if I want to relax than some crystal meth. The ancient Greeks and Romans were most likely blind drunk during most battles, whilst the British Army was still getting through 550,000 gallons of liquid courage a year by the close of the 19th century. It's like just drunk all the time. Love it.
I am not fucking drunk.
As late as 1970, daily tots of rum were still considered an essential ingredient of the Royal Navy rations. 1970! And the sailors are still like, a little bit of rum every day. But when it came to the harder stuff, the military couldn't always make up their minds about whether drugs should be used as a tool to enhance the performance of their own soldiers or as a weapon to hinder the performance of their enemies. Back in 1964, a group of 17 British Royal Marines volunteered to take part in a study on the effects of LSD. This was prompted by rumors that the Soviets had been using mind-controlling drugs, but there was also a British desire to investigate a more humane breed of warfare in which enemies could be taken down via non-lethal methods and bad acid trips. The Marines assembled at the secret military facility Porton Down in Wiltshire and applied with LSD before being given a series of training tasks to complete. It's like, guys, you know what LSD does, right? It's not like you're giving them a bit of cocaine and then wondering if they could do the task faster. It's like you're giving them LSD. They're going to not do the task because they're unaware of what the task is. And be like, whoa! I've never done LSD, but it's not something that I imagine is particularly conducive to having a productive afternoon at the office. The recently unearthed film footage is a small slice of comical beauty. The clipped tones of the vintage super posh narrator appear to vent mild disapproval at the sight of the soldiers falling about in helpless hysterics. They always used to have it in the past. It's like, and now the soldiers appear to be dancing around. The LSD has been ineffective. They struggle to remember their objectives or what you're meant to be doing with a rocket launcher. They lose sight of targets which are only a few hundred yards away and are clearly visible. Because they're on LSD! You gave them LSD! They'd be better off on crystal meth. Shit. They'd be like, how are we going to get these guys to go to war? Mushrooms. Psilocybin mushrooms.
Did you know they were going to have that?
Get in there, Jim.
No.
The narrator feels that, how are we going to get them to do tasks? Salvia. You guys seen that? It's like one of the OG YouTube videos, which I did I must have talked about this before on this channel. It's one of the most internet things that blew my mind. That the gardening on salvia video, which is like one of the OG YouTube videos that I probably ever saw after I was done watching like pirated versions of Ali G as a student. But there's gardening on salvia where this dude is like, and what you do is you plant this thing in here and then you take a hit of your salvia. And then there's just like 2 minutes of him like, as he's on salvia because you can't even move. It's super intense. And that dude is internet comment etiquette Eric. And that was another channel that I love. And I'm just like, what the going on in this world? I love it.
1 hour later.
The narration. It's like same dude. And then he has that salvia song and you're like, oh yeah, yes. Oh my god, okay, back to the story. I'm sorry, we're talking about war and drugs and such. The narrator feels that things are really going badly when one of the Marines completely abandons his objectives and instead decides to climb a tree to feed the birds. God, I love this. The troop commander eventually concedes defeat as he feels he can no longer control himself or his men. So they've actually got a guy who is trying to be the boss in this situation. How does that even work? He announces this shortly before he himself collapses to the floor in a giggle. God, I love this. I love that this was actually an experiment that the British military did at their like secret drug facility. Amazing. Curiously, the brief military trials with LSD came to an abrupt halt in 1968 after the Chemical Defense Advisory Board concluded that the concept of using it as a weapon was more magical than scientific. But I can't help feeling they missed a trick here. Would you rather have your enemy shooting at you, falling about laughing while trying to share their pellets of instant dried soup with the birds? We all know the answer. Moving on. If we rewind about 40 years, military forces were more interested in keeping their drug stashes to themselves rather than giving it to the other side. Cocaine, yes! Arrived on the battlefield during the First World War during a period when the drug was not yet classed as a controlled substance. Ah, yes. In a time we like to refer to as the good old days. The past is not always the worst, you see.
God, I miss cocaine.
The British Army were happy to pass out pills that went under the slightly more sinister brand name of Forced March, a mixture of cocaine and cola nut extract that was designed to increase endurance and suppress the appetite. Back home, wives and family members were encouraged to post gifts to their loved one on the front line in the form of cocaine and heroin. Mel. That's a hell of an afternoon, which they could pick up at the chemists whilst collecting their own bum pimple cream. By the time we get to the Second World War, amphetamines were more in vogue. In particular, Nazi Germany had synthesized its own brand of methamphetamine, which went by the name of Pervitin Big Brain. It's an early version of what we'd call today crystal meth, but it was in handy pill form. I'd rather take a pill. If someone's like, you have to smoke this, I'll be like, no, do you have a pill of it? It feels more medicinal if it's in like a pill form. It's like, what's this? A heroin in a pill form? Okay.
You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Don't do it. I'm a virgin.
What's that called? That's an actual drug that exists, though. I don't know if it's in a pill form. Because heroin is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the UK is the only country in the world where heroin is a prescription drug. It's called like duomorphine or something. Duomorphine? Diamorphine! That's what it's called. I think I made a video about it once. The stuff was initially available to buy over the counter and was even shoved into boxes of meth chocolates targeted at the busy, weight-conscious German housewife who needed a bit of extra motivation to get the vacuum cleaner from the cupboard. Honestly, like the amount of... I love caffeine. Like I drink like 5 coffees a day. I have Red Bulls, love all that. Love it, love it. I'm pretty sure if there was like an amphetamine version of that, I'll be like, yeah, go on then. Go on then. What is that? Like 25 milligrams of caffeine, 100 mils, and like 1 milligram of meth? Sure, I'll do that. How do I prevent my teeth from falling out again? Historians have estimated that approximately 200 million Pervitin pills were dished out to German soldiers with a recommended dosage of 1 pill per day. A few more per day if some serious going down. The idea was to produce an army of chemically enhanced soldiers who could stay awake and march for days on end. The pills would boost confidence and aggression, loosen inhibitions, reduce hunger and pain, and make the spaced-out soldiers more subservient to authority. One soldier who had been given 2 pills at once managed to march all night on frostbitten feet, which required double amputation the following morning when the drugs were off. That's a problem. That's a big problem. But there were downsides too. Danny, that sounds like a pretty major downside. He had a double amputation. Holy shit. He's like, Danny, if that guy was alive, he'd be like, mate, this was a major downside. He's dead now because it was a long time ago. Is anyone alive from the First World War? There must be, right? 1920. There are people who are over 100 years old, but they'd be babies, so they won't remember it. No, there's probably no one alive from who fought in the First World War anymore, right? 1918 to 1921? 23? 21? Oh my god, that's embarrassing. Look, but they're all dead. I don't know why I laughed at that. It's kind of sad. We're all going to die eventually.
That's some pretty dark stuff.
Except for me, I'm going to get put in a robot body. But there were downsides too. The soldiers are often in worse shape than ever before when the pills ran out, with many suffering from heart failure, depression, hallucinations, and death. There was a spike in the number of avoidable accidents and deaths, particularly with Luftwaffe pilots, as these soldiers had lost all sense of fear and making reckless decisions whilst off their tits on crystal meth. Shocking. And there was also the oh-so-small matter of addiction. One young soldier by the name of Heinrich Boll would go on to become a celebrated writer and Nobel laureate, but his letters home from the battlefield painted a revealing picture with very few words. You might expect the letters of a future Nobel laureate to be a bit more flowery than most, but Heinrich's letters devolved into desperate pleas for his family to send more drugs. One of his later missives simply read, "If at all possible, please send me some more Pervitin. Love, Hein." But Hitler could have argued that it wasn't entirely a bad idea. It's speculated that the surprise Nazi victory at the Battle of France was entirely driven by Pervitin. The Nazi forces were outnumbered and outmaneuvered, but the British and French troops were shocked to suddenly find themselves overwhelmed by hordes of heavily drugged and goggle-eyed Nazi German soldiers who just marched through 240 miles of impassable terrain without sleep.
Is that where the phrase "put it in your pipe and smoke it" comes from?
I don't care.
It's like they can fight, and then they have their feet removed. Even Winston Churchill raised a concerned eyebrow over that one. Next, the Germans were remarkably generous in sharing their stash with their friends, and one of the most bizarre stories from the Second World War involved a Finnish soldier going way over the top with Pervitin. Before ultimately joining forces with the Allies, Finland had reluctantly sided with Nazi Germany, largely because they shared a common enemy in the Soviet Union to whom Finland had recently lost territory. Shortly before hopping sides in 1944, Finland had dispatched a ski patrol to Lapland to scout around for Soviet activity. Lapland's one of those places where you're like, that's not real. But apparently it is. It's a real place. Okay. And among the number were a young soldier, unless Danny's just trolling me, but I'm pretty sure it's a real place, were a young soldier named Imo Kuvanen. Imo had been deemed the most trustworthy to look after the bottle of Pervitin pills, largely because he strongly disapproved of this Nazi wonder drug and so was unlikely to neck the whole lot during a particularly bleak afternoon. As Imo himself later recounted in his 1970s memoir, his party soon found themselves outnumbered and under attack from a group of skiing Soviets, and the young Finnish scouts had no option but to ski for their lives.
You trying to kill us?
However, Imo was starting to flag behind his buddies during this epic ski chase across Lapland and felt that the Soviets were inevitably going to catch up with him. But then he remembered about his drug stash. It proved tricky trying to get one pill out of the bottle with his big fluffy mittens whilst simultaneously trying to outski the Soviets, so he had to make a snap decision. He's gonna take an insane amount of crystal meth. Oh my god. Perhaps briefly forgetting that the recommended dosage was usually 1 pill per day, Imo greedily gulped down the entire bottle of 30 pills intended to be shared with his entire patrol over several weeks. Holy shit. Let's see those bloody communists trying to catch up with him now.
Cocaine. No. Flour.
Life went a bit peculiar for Imo over the next few days. He appeared to have lost both his Soviet pursuers and his own party as he triumphantly embarked on his own solo winter decathlon. He just doesn't stop skiing for days. It's just like there's a war. What happened to my teeth? He had no ammunition, no company, no food, and no sense of what day it was. In between frequent blackouts, Imo found himself performing cool ski jumps over landmines, climbing massive hills for no reason, and losing fierce arguments with imaginary people. At one point, he was convinced that he was being stalked by a wolverine with a personal grudge. Imo was destined to lock horns with this fearsome foe, but eventually realized that he was actually just aggressively stabbing an enemy tree. Crystal meth, guys. Not even once.
Oh, whoa. You feel that right away. Wow, that's good. That's good. That's an immediate state of euphoria.
There appeared to be some welcome news on the horizon when an increasingly desperate Imo eventually caught sight of his own group in the distance, and he skied frantically towards their camp. Except it wasn't his group, nor was it a figment of his imagination. Oh no, he's like, woo, 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 hello Soviets, woo, woo. It was actually the very same Soviets that he'd cleverly escaped from several days earlier. Imo realized his mistake far too late, and he didn't have time to change course, so instead he just skied right past the camp of utterly bewildered soldiers and just kept going. Mad lad. The Soviets were somewhat taken by surprise by the brief random appearance of the Finnish guy now twitching and convulsing and occasionally attacking the trees. If Imo had been British, I'd like to think he would have cheerfully tipped his bowler hat at the Soviets as he whizzed right by the camp in a manic, icy blur. Imo was understandably starting to feel a bit chilly out there, so he was relieved to stumble across some shelter in the form of an abandoned cabin. In an effort to get all nice and toasty, he chopped up some wood, got a nice fire going on the wooden floor of the wooden cabin, and settled down for a nice nap. He's going to burn the cabin down. To his irritation, his sleep was regularly interrupted by the cabin erupting into a fireball, but he stubbornly stuck it out until the roof collapsed and the flames licking his face became a bit too much to bear. He didn't have much luck with cabins after that. He briefly thought that he'd found another one, but it was actually the North Star. It's too absurd to not be real. It's like, what did you think? How do you mistake the North Star for a cabin? This makes it just... what? And he'd been attempting to ski into the sky to reach it. Oh, because it's like a light. This is insane. When he found another real cabin to hopefully sleep under after setting it on fire, it was unfortunately situated in an old German camp that had been liberally sprinkled with booby traps. Imo wasn't very quick to catch on, though. You'd think he might have considered turning back when he stepped on the first landmine and reduced his foot, in Imo's own words, to a mix of grated flesh and bone splinters. But he still carried on poking around those cabins until he set off another explosive trap, which sent him hurtling into the air and left him physically unable to ski or walk or barely even move. At this point, he befriended a gorgeous little Serbian, Jay, in the snow, and this moment perhaps highlights some of the differences between LSD and crystal meth. Whereas those British soldiers felt compelled to climb trees to try and feed the cute little birds, Imo just bit its head off and sank his teeth into the raw winged food parcel sent from the sky.
They're actually enjoying it.
Of course they're enjoying it. It's crack.
This is the most mental story that I've ever heard in my life. He thought the North Star was a cabin. He was skiing into the sky. What the man? Things may have been looking a bit grim for Imo. At one point, he was seriously considering ending it all with another landmine that he'd dug up to pass the time, but he was ultimately rescued by another Finnish patrol and taken to hospital, by which point he weighed less than 100 pounds. Not many calories in, those Siberian Jays. He went on to raise a family and died of natural causes at the age of 71 in 1989. I'm not sure what the moral of this story is meant to be, but I can't believe that nobody has picked up the movie rights to this yet. This is a mental story. I love it. It'd be a bit of a weird movie, though. Perhaps any prospective producers would find it tricky to figure out if they were supposed to be making an action thriller, a dark twisted horror, or a knockabout psychedelic comedy. I think it's just all of the above, to be honest. Next entry. It wasn't just the Nazis and their friends who were necking hard drugs like there was no tomorrow, which in fairness is a distinct possibility during a world war. The Allies had their own form of amphetamines in the form of benzodrine, commonly known as bennies. The British troops believed to have got through about 72 million bennies during World War II, whilst American forces are estimated to consume somewhere between 250 and 500 million bills. It's difficult to know for sure, as the Pentagon never revealed how much Benny they were getting for their buck. And just as Pervitin is believed to have played a part in the Nazis' successful invasion of France, benzodrine may have come in handy during Britain's comprehensive victory at the Second Battle of El Alamein, for which Lieutenant General Bernard Montgomery distributed no less than 100,000 bills alone. Buck up, boys, over the top.
Where'd you get crack?
I'm from the government, and I'm here to help.
What?
Yeah, right behind Black's hardware store. There's a white guy selling it.
Get on those bennies! Hopefully he didn't just distribute them all to the British version of Imo Coven and the Finnish dude. The guy who was on drugs and thought the North Star was a cabin. Of course, drug usage in the military didn't die out in World War II. The Vietnam War is often described as the first pharmacological war due to the unprecedented use of both military-prescribed and self-prescribed psychoactive substances. Our Select Committee on Crime in 1971 reported that 225 million dextroamphetamine tablets were officially issued to U.S. military between 1966 and 1969, whilst a 1973 Pentagon study suggested that as many as 20% of U.S. soldiers were also regularly topping up heroin on the side. Oh yeah, I do remember that. In Vietnam War, heroin was a big thing, because they make it out there, right? Or close by, or something like that. Is it the opium triangle? The opium triangle, the something triangle with those countries with the heroin and stuff? I don't know. Right up until 2017, American pilots were still being officially issued with amphetamines to stop them nodding off on long flights. And amphetamines are still rife as ever in Middle Eastern conflicts, with some suggesting that the entire Syrian civil war is largely fueled by the phenethylene compound Captagon. But I still reckon that the British military had half of the right idea back in the 1960s. Imagine how different modern warfare would look if they'd slipped out LSD to the governments and leaders and ruthless dictators instead of the soldiers. Nobody's going to have time to even contemplate randomly invading their neighbors if they're too busy making daisy chains and feeding the little birdies. Indeed, and that is the end of today's video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. He thought the North Star was a cabin. They're totally different things. Time to have a chill evening. Let's do a few lines of coke.
Now, Brian, I understand we have some crack, and we're going to smoke it right here in the studio. I don't know if you can get a shot of that.
What is that?